Washington Journal continues.
We will have a conversation about Iran and the U.S. with Benhem Ben Taleblu of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's their senior fellow. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
We have calls lined up for you. This is Benhem Ben Taleblu of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Boston, Massachusetts. Up first on our line for Democrats, this is Doug. Go ahead. You're on with our guest.
Hi. Anybody who knows anything at all about the Middle East knows that the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies is an unregistered lobby group for Israeli interests. Now, here's my question for Mr. Taleblu. Currently, the law of the land is the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Assistance Act. That law states that any country that possesses or produces nuclear weapons without having signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty shall not receive United States foreign aid. Israel currently possesses and produces nuclear weapons. It refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, unlike Iran, and it's also the largest recipient of United States foreign aid, $3.8 billion per annum. Something wrong with this scenario. We both know what it is.
Okay, we'll let our guest address it.
Well, I'm no expert in Israel's nuclear program, but there is great literature out there on it. In particular, a book, I think, by Avner Cohen is really one of the foundational books used here in Washington to assess the scale and scope of Iran's nuclear program. I'll ignore the slander against our organization, pretending it to likening to be some sort of foreign lobby group. But in essence, there's always been this talk of what countries in the Middle East do have a nuclear capability, the threat of those countries that have civilian nuclear programs going to become military nuclear programs has always been there. You've seen Israel actually use force against Iraq, against Syria. You've had multiple debates about the future of a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. But I think as long as you have rising threats to that order, particularly questions over the scale and scope of Iran's program, we may not be able to address the full scale of other countries' latent nuclear capabilities or programs. So I think that some of that question needs to be addressed first through the history of U.S.-Israel relations, which scholars who focus on Israel should be able to tackle for you. That Avner Cohen book is a good starting point, reading recommendation for the caller. But second, when you're looking at proliferation in the region, perhaps best to deal with some of these emergent threats.
This is our next call from Washington, D.C. Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, my question for Benhem Ben Taleblu, and I guess I'd like to know if he is Israeli, just following up on that previous caller. But the question is, the law is the law. The Symington and Glenn amendments referred to by the previous caller require every president to notify Congress when they're going to give aid to a nuclear proliferator. And the leading state sponsor of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East is Israel. It's removed material during the Numek affair from the United States illegally. It's conducted nuclear tests. It's misused Atoms for Peace infrastructure provided by U.S. taxpayers.
So, caller, since the last caller addressed this and our conversation is about Iran, do you have a specific question about that, please?
Yeah, to Iran. How can the U.S. possibly pretend to be against nuclear proliferation when we have this giant exception for Israel and all of these Israel front groups like FDD out there?
Okay, caller, we'll leave it there.
So if the question is nuclear proliferation in the region, I think proliferation is a key word there, because proliferation actually implies the spread of the material. And that's something that we have to be concerned about, given Iran's reach into Europe, given the fact that, for instance, while the nuclear deal was in effect, you have German intelligence agencies talking about Iran going shopping on European territory for material of relevance for its nuclear and missile programs, for Iran continuing to develop a parallel missile program, most but not all of which has significance for a potential nuclear delivery vehicle one day. Iran's shopping in places in East Asia as well to improve its missile capabilities. So there is great concern to address this rising Iranian challenge. And I think one helpful framing tool, again, I'm not a scholar of U.S.-Israel relations, I focus on Iran, but